Have you ever been in a situation where just everything is going completely wrong? Like you are entirely stressed out, maybe it's an emergency, and you interact with someone, a customer service worker, a nurse, or, a repair person who is just impossibly, remarkably calm.
Oh, yeah. The kind of calm where, like, the building could literally be on fire and they're just looking at you with this steady, completely unhurried gaze,
Oh,
unaffected by the chaos.
exactly. And it feels almost jarring when you encounter it, right?
Yeah.
Because you're panicking.
It really is. You almost feel silly for panicking when they're that composed.
Right. And you almost always walk away thinking, well, that person was simply born with a gift. I mean, we tend to view that kind of extreme steadiness as a personality trait,
Mm.
just this natural disposition they happen to possess.
Like they're just a naturally zen human being.
Exactly. But today's deep dive is designed to entirely dismantle that assumption. Our mission today is to unpack this invisible, mostly unpaid part of our daily work lives, which is this hidden psychological mechanic dictating how we interact with the world.
It's a huge topic, and I'm really excited we're getting into it today.
Same here. We've got a really fascinating stack of sources for this deep dive, but we are primarily centering on a profound written reflection by Dave Hartzell. He's a master HVAC technician, and his work leans heavily on the foundational sociological research of Arlie Hochschild. So basically, we're going to look at the hidden mechanics behind manufactured calm.
And grounding this in Dave Hartzell's lived experience is just so crucial. I mean, he is not a psychologist sitting in a lab somewhere. He's a guy based in Kingfisher, Oklahoma, who has spent 47 years in the heating and air conditioning trade.
47 years is a long time to be dealing with stressed out homeowners.
It really is. He owns his own business, and he recently wrote this incredible reflection on what he calls the calm he puts on like a uniform. And he opens his essay with this incredibly revealing anecdote. Basically, a customer recently complimented him, telling him he was the calmest man she had ever met.
Which, I mean, anyone would take that as high praise, right? You'd normally just say thank you and move on.
Right. And he did thank her, but he also made a very deliberate choice not to tell her the truth about his morning.
What was the truth?
The reality was that he had been up since 4 o'clock in the morning with a severely sick dog. He had endured this terrible, totally sleepless night. He was physically and mentally just exhausted.
Oh, wow. So he was completely running on empty.
Exactly. So the calm that this customer was so deeply admiring, it wasn't some innate Zen state he just woke up with. It was something he had entirely manufactured. As Dave describes it, that calm was something he put on that morning, just like he put on a clean work shirt.
That is such a powerful image. And what Dave is touching on here moves far beyond, a quirky anecdote about fixing air conditioners. He is pointing directly to this massive psychological framework that most of us participate in every single day without even realizing it.
We're all doing it to some degree.
Yeah, we are. In his reflection, Dave actually connects his morning with a dog to the work of sociologist Arlie Hochschild. Back in 1983, she published this groundbreaking book called The Managed Heart.
Oh, that is a classic text. Absolutely foundational.
Right. And she spent time studying flight attendants, observing how they were explicitly trained to be warm, pleasant, and soothing. And the fascinating part of her research was that this warmth was mandated, regardless of the external environment or, their internal state.
It didn't matter what was actually happening on the plane or in their lives.
Exactly. It didn't matter if there was extreme turbulence or a verbally abusive passenger, or if the flight attendant was experiencing a personal crisis at home. They were required by their employer to project a very specific type of warmth. And Hochschild coined the term emotional labor to describe this exact phenomenon.
Which is so interesting because, we hear the phrase emotional labor thrown around constantly in modern discourse today.
Oh, all the time. People use it on social media for everything.
Right, but it's often diluted to mean simply dealing with something annoying, or even just doing household chores, like, oh, reminding my spouse to buy milk is emotional labor.
Yeah, that's definitely not how she meant it.
Not at all. Hochschild's original definition in the text is much more precise, and it is the exact definition Dave uses. She defined emotional labor as the work of managing your own feelings to produce a desired feeling in someone else, specifically as a rigid requirement of your job.
A rigid requirement of the job. That's the key part.
Exactly. When you look at the flight attendant through that lens, they aren't just pushing a beverage cart or, point to the emergency exits. A significant portion of their compensation is for seeming calm so that you, the passenger, remain calm in a metal tube 30,000 feet in the air.
I love that framing. They are actively managing their inner state to manipulate your inner state.
And that psychological management is literal labor. I mean, it requires real effort, it burns actual calories, and it demands intense cognitive focus. It is work in the exact same way that lifting a 50-pound suitcase into an overhead bin is work.
But with one major difference, right?
Right. The discrepancy is that lifting the suitcase is a highly visible physical act. The emotional management is entirely invisible, it never shows up on an invoice, and it rarely gets formally recognized in a performance review.
Okay, let's unpack this and apply that framework directly to Dave and his HVAC work to see how this plays out in the wild. Let's imagine a homeowner in the dead of winter. They have a flooded basement, the temperature is dropping outside, and their furnace is completely dead.
That is a nightmare scenario.
Complete nightmare. They are in a state of acute panic. They're terrified about the impending financial costs, the water damage, the freezing pipes. When Dave, the technician, walks through that front door, that homeowner's brain is going to read his facial expression and body language in the first 3 seconds.
Yep, it is a primal evolutionary assessment. The customer's amygdala is just scanning the environment for threats.
And it all comes down to emotional contagion. If Dave walks into that chaotic basement radiating stress-like, if his brow is furrowed, if he's rushing his movements, if he sighs heavily because, he is running on 2 hours of sleep ever dealing with his sick dog.
The customer's going to instantly catch that stress.
Exactly. Their own panic is going to spike because the supposed expert looks worried. On the flip side, if he walks in radiating quiet competence, keeping his movements unhurried and his voice steady, the customer's shoulders will literally physically drop.
They finally feel safe.
Right. A terrified homeowner with a dead furnace doesn't just need a mechanic with a wrench. They require a technician who is calm enough to stabilize the emotional state of the entire household.
Which means a massive invisible part of Dave's job description involves regulating his own nervous system so strictly that it forces the customer's nervous system to regulate itself.
And Dave is incredibly candid about the toll this takes on him. He admits in his writing that on a difficult day, this emotional labor is the heaviest piece of equipment he carries.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. The physical act of turning wrenches, hauling heavy condenser units, or climbing into freezing attics, that costs him less energy than the psychological strain of managing a panicked customer's emotions.
Because this emotional regulation is just an inescapable requirement of the service industry, we have to look at the mechanics of survival. I mean, Hochschild's research dedicated significant time to this specific problem.
Right, because how do you just keep doing that every day?
Exactly. If a worker is required to suppress their own exhaustion or frustration day after day, year after year, the psychological wear and tear should theoretically just destroy them.
It sounds totally unsustainable.
It is. And Hochschild identified 2 primary methods workers use to perform this mandatory emotional labor. The first method she documented is called surface acting.
Surface acting. That sounds exactly like what most of us do when we're trapped in a frustrating customer service interaction. Just smiling and nodding.
It is the most common approach. Surface acting is simply the act of faking it. You plaster a polite smile on your face while you are internally seething, profoundly exhausted, or completely dissociated.
Just totally checked out.
Yeah. You are forcefully displaying an emotion on the outside that you absolutely do not feel on the inside. You are essentially wearing a mask.
Like gritting your teeth while dealing with a furious client, all while playing the part of the cheerfully compliant professional.
You can maintain that facade for a short period, sure, but Hochschild's research, along with decades of subsequent psychological studies, shows that surface acting carries a devastating physiological cost.
Because your brain knows you're faking it.
Exactly. The human nervous system does not handle cognitive dissonance well. When there is a constant daily gap between the emotion you are genuinely experiencing and the emotion you are forcing your facial muscles to display, it creates massive internal friction.
Your brain is essentially fighting itself.
Yes. And this friction triggers a low-level stress response, literally dripping cortisol into your system throughout your entire shift. It hollows people out and is recognized as one of the primary fast-track roads to severe burnout in caregiving and service professions.
And Dave verifies this sociological theory with his own boots-on-the-ground observations. Looking back over his 47 years in the trade, He notes how many technicians he has watched leave the HVAC industry completely bitter, angry, and broken.
It's a notoriously high burnout field.
It is, and he recognizes now that those men were surface acting for decades. The agonizing gap between their fake, polite smiles and their internal, mounting stress just slowly ate away at their capacity for empathy.
They were fighting a war against their own genuine emotional state every single time they clocked in. It's tragic.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. If surface acting is a guaranteed ticket to burnout, we have to examine the alternative. How does someone like Dave survive nearly half a century in a high-stress trade without turning bitter?
Right. How did he avoid that trap?
Well, Hochschild's research points to a second method of emotional labor, which she termed deep acting.
And deep acting forms the entire foundation of Dave's professional philosophy and his unbelievable longevity in the trade.
Now, I need to push back on this concept a bit, or at least explore the potential trap inside it, because when you first encounter the term deep acting, it sounds incredibly manipulative toward oneself.
How so?
Well, isn't deep acting essentially just lying to yourself with extra cognitive steps? Like, how is working yourself up into a frenzy to fake a feeling any better or any less neurologically exhausting than just pasting on a fake smile? It sounds like you were just forcing yourself to swallow toxic positivity.
That is the most common and honestly logical critique of the concept. But the distinction Hochschild draws, and the one Dave successfully employs, relies on the actual biological mechanism of how the emotion is generated. Deep acting is not faking the calm.
Okay, so what is it then?
The critical difference is that with deep acting, you are actually manufacturing the feeling from the inside until it becomes a genuine emotion.
Manufacturing it implies a process, right? Like a raw material turning into something real.
Exactly. You are not plastering a fake emotion over a contradictory real one. You are engaging in active cognitive reappraisal. You shift your internal perspective and your focus so thoroughly that you generate the required feeling organically.
So you're changing the reality of how you
But
feel.
by doing the internal psychological work to actually feel the empathy or the calm you're supposed to display, you bring your inner state and your outer expression into total alignment. When the inside matches the outside, you eliminate the cognitive dissonance. You completely remove that physiological friction that makes surface acting so corrosive.
I mean, eliminating that internal friction sounds great in a sociology textbook, but translating that into the real world when you're exhausted seems nearly impossible.
It definitely takes practice.
Well, to see how this actually works, we can look at Dave's specific playbook, because he has developed a highly intentional routine over the decades to execute this deep acting before he ever interacts with a customer.
He relies on a very specific transition ritual, right?
Yes, exactly. It happens in the cab of his work truck, in the quiet moments just before he walks up a customer's driveway. Dave details this pre-door routine in his reflection. He turns off the engine and just sits in the driver's seat. He actively, deliberately makes the cognitive choice to leave the 4 o'clock in the morning wake-up call in the truck.
He just leaves it there.
He mentally boxes up the sleepless night, the stress of the sick dog, his own physical fatigue, and he leaves it all in the vehicle. Then he initiates that cognitive reappraisal you mentioned. He decides that for the next hour, this specific customer's broken furnace is the only problem that matters in the entire world.
He focuses his attention entirely outward. He shrinks his universe down to the customer's immediate need.
Right, and he works himself into a state of active caring. He starts building genuine mechanical curiosity about what the fault in the system might be. He cultivates a real sense of gladness that he actually possesses the specific skills required to help this person out of a really bad situation.
That is such a powerful shift in mindset.
It is. Dave notes that by the time he finally opens the truck door and knocks on the customer's front door, the calm he is projecting is not a mask at all. It is a real physiological state. He manufactured it deliberately over the last 5 minutes, but once it is built, it is entirely genuine.
And Dave frames this realization with a brilliant metaphor that I think cuts to the very core of this deep dive. He calls this the fundamental difference between a uniform you resent and a uniform you choose.
The uniform you resent versus a uniform you choose.
I love that.
Outwardly, the visual data is identical.
The customer sees the exact same thing either way. They just see the appearance of quiet, unhurried competence. The difference lies entirely in the internal weight the technician is carrying. Surface acting is a uniform you resent because it functions as a prison.
You're trapped.
Yeah, you are trapped behind a fake smile while your real emotions scream to get out. Deep acting, on the other hand, is a uniform you consciously choose to put on. You have aligned your internal emotional state with the external requirements of your job.
Because there's no internal war being fought.
Exactly. And because of that, that chosen uniform is vastly more sustainable over a 47-year career.
I want you to filter your own daily experiences through this framework for a second. Think about the specific moments in your week where you are required to project an emotion you didn't wake up feeling
We all have them.
every single day. It could be projecting unwavering confidence in a high-stakes board meeting, or maybe projecting infinite patience while dealing with a screaming toddler, or maintaining a warm tone with an incredibly difficult client. In those moments, ask yourself which method you are actually using. Are you surface acting?
Are you plastering on the appropriate face while feeling that grinding internal friction?
That slow drip of cortisol that leads to burnout? Or are you finding a way to engage in deep acting? Are you able to cognitively reframe the situation until you genuinely generate the required patience or confidence from the inside? Identifying which mechanism you rely on might instantly explain why certain tasks leave you feeling profoundly drained at the end of the day, while others just don't.
It serves as a highly accurate diagnostic tool for our own daily exhaustion. I think it's incredibly useful.
But, Dave is incredibly careful not to romanticize this process. Deep acting is a powerful tool, absolutely, but it is not magic and it is certainly not free.
No, it remains, by definition, labor. It requires a tremendous amount of cognitive fuel to do that kind of internal reframing.
Right. And Dave is honest about the fact that on some days the tank is just completely empty. There are shifts where he simply cannot muster the cognitive energy required to deep act. On those days, the absolute best he can offer is what he wryly calls honest surface acting, and just making sure he goes to bed early.
Honest surface acting, that's great.
Yeah. But this limitation points to the darker side of emotional labor, which is the hidden costs of being exceptionally skilled at managing other people's states.
This raises an important question, actually, because when you become a master at deep acting, a new psychological danger emerges. We can think of this as the trap of extreme competence. Both Dave's personal reflections and Arlie Hochschild's academic research zeroed in on this specific hazard.
If you spend years perfecting the art of managing your emotions for the benefit of others, you get incredibly good at masking your own baseline reality.
You get too good at it.
Way too good. People around you simply stop perceiving your fatigue.
Eh.
As Dave hauntingly puts it, the calm man hides his own bad nights so well that nobody even thinks to ask how he's doing.
Wow. Yeah, the customer, the coworker, or even a friend just sees the steady uniform. They see the unbreakable rock. They do not see the exhaustion, the sick dog, or the sheer effort required to maintain that steadiness.
They just assume you're fine.
Always. But the trap goes much deeper than simply feeling unnoticed by others. There is a profound internal consequence to a lifetime of deep acting. If you spend decades constantly monitoring and adjusting your own internal feelings to ensure that a customer or a patient feels secure, you risk losing track of your own genuine emotional baseline.
You literally forget where the manufactured professional ends and where your authentic self begins.
Hochschild warned about this extensively in her research. She called it emotional alienation. When you manufacture emotions for a living, even when you do it genuinely and healthily through deep acting, the boundary between your authentic reactions and your professional requirements begins to dissolve.
It gets blurry.
Very blurry. And Dave confirms he has experienced this firsthand. He admits there were stretches of his career where he was so consumed with managing the emotional states of his customers that he realized he had completely lost touch with how he actually felt about his own life.
That is the ultimate hidden cost of the invisible invoice. You end up paying for the customer's comfort with your own emotional grounding. Knowing that surface acting leads to rapid burnout and deep acting can lead to this slow, creeping alienation from oneself. How does a person survive? I mean, Dave has managed to stay in this demanding trade for half a century while keeping his humanity intact.
Well, he survived by establishing rigid boundaries around where and when the uniform is worn. He basically figured out how to escape the trap of his own competence.
Right, and he shares his solution at the very end of his essay, and it is remarkably practical. He states that when he is off the clock, particularly with the people who truly know him, like his family, his close friends, he makes a highly intentional choice to take the uniform off.
He completely stops managing his emotional state for their benefit.
Yes, he consciously allows his loved ones to see the 4 o'clock in the morning exhaustion. He lets them see the frustration, the empty tank, and the stress of the sick dog.
He entirely ceases the labor of regulating their nervous systems.
He gives himself explicit permission to be messy, unmanaged, and visibly tired. And he can do this because he understands that the manufactured calm is a deliberate, crafted gift he provides to the customer.
What's an offering?
Exactly. It is a borrowed steadiness that helps them survive their flooded basement, a service that never shows up on the final bill. But he has finally realized that this manufactured calm is a tool he uses. It is not the totality of who he is as a human being.
Synthesizing all of this, the core takeaway is a radical shift in how we perceive the immense value and the crushing weight of emotional labor. Whether you are the person providing this labor in your daily life or the person benefiting from it as a customer, a patient, or a passenger, understanding these hidden mechanics just changes your perspective.
It really does.
Recognizing the fundamental difference between the friction of surface acting and the cognitive effort of deep acting can totally alter how you manage your own energy. It also vastly expands your capacity for empathy toward every single service worker, healthcare provider, or caregiver you interact with.
It completely pulls back the curtain on how much invisible, psychological heavy lifting is occurring all around us every single day just to keep society functioning without constant panic.
It serves as a reminder that extreme calm in a professional setting is almost never a happy accident of personality. It is an active, strenuous choice.
As we wrap up our exploration of these sources, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today. Think about the person in your own life. Maybe it's a parent who always held things together, a boss who never panics, a partner or a friend who you have always admired for being the rock, one who is effortlessly naturally calm whenever a crisis hits.
We all have someone like that.
We do. But consider the possibility that it isn't effortless at all. What if their incredible steadiness isn't just a quirk of their personality? What if that calm is actually a massive, invisible act of love and strenuous, deep acting, and they're just waiting for someone to finally look past their uniform and ask them how tired they really are?